This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment mentor for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute, nor is it to convey professional, psychological, financial, or medical advice. If you could use such services, please seek them out from someone you trust. Now here is today's episode. Episode 75. And before I dive into today's episode, I'm going to invite you to head on over to my website, NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/assessment, and find out where you are with any perfectionist thinking or behaviors that may be holding you back in your life. Are there some fears that are driving you and under that umbrella of perfectionism or not? This is not a psychological test. This is just a true little assessment to kind of help you see where you are currently in your life with perfectionism. And I think it's going to apply to even today's topic regarding the holiday stuff. So I encourage you to go out to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/assessment. Here's today's episode. Well, welcome, sisters. Before I dive into today's episode, I just want to give you a heads up that I have decided that the month of December, I'm not going to be releasing any new episodes. I may, if I feel called to do it, I may, kind of show up and do some bonus episodes. But right now, I'm actually going to take a break. I've got some beautiful people lined up for interviews. And instead of feeling really rushed in getting them out to you, I want to get some other things kind of lined up, and then they will start back in January. So for the month of December, I truly hope you take care of yourself, that you take some of that downtime, you rejuvenate, set up your goals for 2020. I know there's been talk for people saying, I think September's the new December or something. I don't know. It makes me kind of giggle because I like to do a lot of review in December of my goals that I had set out for that year, and then begin to either pick up where I left off, fine tune them a little bit, or mark them off the list and then focus on where I want to go in the following year. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of myself and some of the goals that I've achieved over this year. So hope you really give yourself that time to do that for yourself too. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about the holidays, both the one that's coming up this week here in the U.S., which is Thanksgiving, and then the one that's coming up later in December, which is Christmas and New Year's. I remember being in grad school, and we've talked about how the holidays bring up a lot of stuff around family. So I've talked about this topic once before when I did Launching Your Daughter, and I want to bring it up again because it literally is a topic of conversation every single year, both in my clinical practice and also my coaching practice. And what I mean by this is oftentimes adult women will say yes to things regarding family because they're doing it under the sense of obligation. And in grad school, I remember many of my professors talked about how what'll typically happen during family gatherings is adults will actually regress back to as if they're adolescents. So if you really haven't done your inner work, you're not aware of this, just pay attention to that this year. I'm going to encourage you to really stay in your adult body, stay in your adult way of thinking, and being able to say no, explore expectations that may be out there so that you're not under the sense of or belief that you have to do holidays with family. Maybe it works out for you, and then again, maybe it doesn't. Obligation often leads to resentment, which then will impact the relationship if you're feeling resentful towards somebody. If those expectations aren't stated clearly, talk about them, ask about them. So for example, I know some people that I've worked with in the past where they were new to this family gathering and they were like, I don't know what we're going to do or how long we're supposed to stay or what we're supposed to bring. And I'm like, did you ask? Well, no, because I don't want to offend anybody. I think I'm supposed to just know this. And I'm like, well, how would you know if you've never attended? Sometimes it's those small little subtle things that can take the fear and doubts down and the resentment down too. So you can ask, like, Hey, how long does this typically happen? When does it start? What would you like me to bring? And if you don't want to stay, it's okay to say that too. It's like, hey, just to give you a heads up, family and I are going to come in for maybe 2 days and then we're going to head out again because we really want to have our own family time. The kids have off of school and we really just want to recharge as a family as a whole. That's okay too. You are making the rules for your life, not other people, unless you let them. In my own life, when I started to set up some boundaries as an adult, I definitely ruffled a few feathers. I got some people pretty angry at me because I think the thought they had, which they truly didn't articulate to me, was that I was doing this to them versus they were being impacted by it. And they chose not to share that or didn't have the awareness of that. And I'm not going to name specific people in this, but I know it's uncomfortable conversations, but remember, being uncomfortable for 10, 15 minutes a day is so much better than feeling resentful. When you're coming under that mask of obligation, what that typically means is you're jumping that side of the fence and you're over in somebody else's sidewalk, their side of the lane. And then you're over functioning because you're trying to please them. And then yet that resentment is building up more and more and more for you. It's not okay. You got to really take care of yourself and assert yourself and just start with those small boundaries. So let me back up again. So when I left for grad school for my master's degree, I definitely didn't come home for every single holiday. Some of the reasons why I didn't come home was that, it was a long flight from California to Indiana. Two, during the, December, January timeframe, there's often a lot of snow and I didn't want to travel during those fun, hectic times, and that's really those high seasons as well. Three, financially, I chose not to go into debt to fly back and forth for those times. So what I would end up doing is, making some phone calls, saying hi to everybody when everybody was all gathered together. Did I miss them? Yes. Did I do something different? You betcha. I hung out with friends. I ended up just making my own holiday kind of traditions, and it was totally okay. But I know for some of the relatives, they were pretty angry with me or mad with me that I didn't take the effort to come home. And that's okay. They get to feel however they feel. It's remembering, ladies, you're not responsible for other people's emotions. You're responsible to how you conduct yourself with people. How you interact. Do you react to people or are you responding to people? That's the biggest thing. I made a choice. They were impacted by my choice. Wasn't bad or good. It is what it was. That's it. Sometimes the simplest thing to do is say, thank you so much for the invitation, and that's just not going to work out for me this holiday. Or thank you so much for the invitation. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend this time, but maybe next time. Some of those simple little things, that's how you say no. That's how you set that boundary. I want to pivot now and actually talk about how to truly manage loss and death around the holidays. It's like this phenomenon, and we know this, I think, more in the clinical world than anything else, but there's a lot of death usually around the holidays. Some of that, the thinking is that there's a gathering of people, and so those who are getting close to dying, whether they're older or they've got something else going on with them health-wise, that they wait until their loved ones are around them before they pass. I know this is filled with so much sadness for many of you. Again, you get to do what works for you. So some of you, maybe this is your year of firsts, that this is the first year that loved one, that they're not going to be around, and you may not be able to do a whole day of holiday gathering, and that's okay. Some of you may need to change up the rituals that occurred during the holidays. Maybe even as simple as lighting a candle, saying a prayer in remembrance of the person who is no longer there to celebrate the holidays with you. Whatever you need to do for you, for your family, is okay. If anyone else has an issue with it, remember it's their issue. And you can let them know, it's like, hey, it's really hurtful, or you are dealing with this loss, this grief in your way, and I'm going to deal with it in my way. There's no right one way to do this. I know some people have needed to actually bow out of all holiday activities in the year of first because it was very painful for them to participate in it. The following year, they slowly went back and did a couple things, which is totally fine. There's no right or wrong to do what works for you. You may need to change up some rituals or all rituals. Maybe you used to go to grandma's house and that's where all the family gatherings were, and now she's no longer alive. And so everybody's like, what do we do? What do we do? Maybe you pick like a hall that you all gather in and that you do a potluck where it's kind of a neutral space. It's not under somebody's family's home. Maybe it is under a different family relative home. Maybe you change up some of those things. Again, maybe you talk about grandma so everybody can at least be remembering her, and it's not a big bad scary thing to bring up who you miss. If you have a family that is a very safe space for you to share your emotions and allow you to be where you are, that is wonderful. I know for most families, though, there are a level of things that go smoothly and sometimes not. If you grew up in an abusive home and you don't want to go back to that, even though every year everybody gets together and they don't understand why you don't attend, so be it. They get to wonder. You get to choose whether you attend those events or not. It is your life. You get one of them. And even if you believe in the afterlife, reincarnation, it's like you're making the most of the one that you've been given. You've got to do it what works for you and in your way, not doing it out of obligation for fear of what people may say, especially if there's been an abusive family. You didn't cause it, you didn't create it, but you can make a choice not to return to that or do it in a very limited time frame if they are no longer abusive or like when you grew up. Sometimes it can be really challenging to navigate that, and then I would encourage you to get the support that you need through therapy if there's a lot of trauma stuff that you're working through. I say these things, ladies, because I was reminded, a few weeks back, I've got a couple of good friends of mine that they're going through some hard times right now. They've got some difficult things going on. And it just really reminded me again that I often get into my own little trance of taking life for granted and, it's not a big deal, I'll deal with it later, versus, no, I'm not living as intentionally as I want to. So it is living life intentionally, consciously. And I talk about this over and over and over in these podcasts. But it comes the same thing with the holidays. Are you living, does it light you up when you go to these holiday gatherings? Maybe not the whole time does it, but maybe there's certain moments you're just like, oh my gosh, it's just like being wrapped up into a warm, fuzzy blanket and I love it. Then hang on to those moments. If it becomes so drudgery going back, then maybe it's time to do something different. No one can make that decision for you. Only you can. And know that I get it can be really scary, feel uncomfortable to start to pivot, do something different, stand up for yourself assertively, yet it's your life. If in 3 months it's all you've got left on this planet, what do you want to do with it? And that's truly where I'm coming from. It's really looking at, in a year from now, if somebody was mad at me for it, it's like, okay, in a year from now, is that going to bother me? I mean, it's amazing how many, I'm going to say it's, almost 2 decades now, for some of that stuff to actually be smoothed over with some of my family members. Again, their stuff, and I can observe that. I don't take it on. It's their thing. And there's still some moments where it gets kind of grumpy because I'm like, yeah, I'm choosing not to drive up in the really yucky weather either. That's okay too. It's my safety. I choose not to, and you can feel disappointed and you can tell me you feel disappointed and we move on. There's other ways to be able to do gatherings without making it so charged that it's like, it's the end all be all. Because more often than not, it's really not. So I hope this was helpful in the sense that it's okay to say no. It's okay to say, Hey, can we do this a little differently? I know this is kind of at the very last minute of stuff, but you know what? As an adult, you are totally able to change your mind anytime you want to. So if things are coming up for you, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just so exhausted from everything I've been doing that I just need to stay at home for just a day. And that means the actual Thanksgiving day, then let your family members know that. If part of your family wants to go to the gathering, that's okay too. Truly. Say, hey, unfortunately, I'm not going to attend this year, but everyone else is. Or would it be possible for us to change the dates to a weekend? I know that often comes up with some families. I find it fascinating, the inability to flex the dates when kids launch and they become adults and then they get married and then they have their own families, how sometimes the older folks don't want to change the dates. And it's like they're so stuck on it has to be on the specific date, yet it doesn't work for most people. It's like sometimes you need to do it a couple weekends prior to that, or the family has grown so much, you cannot make it even in the same month. It's like you make it what you want it to be. You have options, you have choices. One way to also say no is truly, I think for HSPs especially, it's like I'm at the end of my bandwidth and I don't have the energy to expend, so it's not going to work for me this year. And that's okay too. If you've got a sick kid, don't force yourself to go. It's like, one of my kiddos is sick and I need to stay home, so thank you. I wish I was able to, and unfortunately, it's not going to work out for me this year. Thank you for inviting me. And what I need to do this year is actually take some time just for myself and to my family. Or thank you for thinking of me, but I can't this year. This year, I'm actually learning how to limit my commitments. Statements like that can really go a long way and allow the other person just, they get to feel, like I said, what they want to feel. If they're feeling disappointed, if they're feeling hurt, say, recognize that, reflect that back to them. But to keep your relationship intact is huge. Remember, Brené Brown talks quite a bit about, moving away as we disappear into our own lives. And this is what, with not setting boundaries, moving toward as we try to get out of shame by people pleasing, or moving against as we try to disconnect from the pain of shame by creating shame and pain. So take the step that leads to those healthy boundaries for you, and let your family members know what works for you and what doesn't. It's okay. You can even say, 2019, this has been the year I'm really practicing on saying no, not out of obligation, but out of true alignment with what works for me or what works for my family, because we've already had this conversation, my family and I, and this is what we need this year for this holiday. So thank you again for the invite, and I'm going to say no. Hope that all works for you. I wish you all just a lovely holiday season. And again, I may pop in December, but I'm going to do a lot of my own little downtime and recharging as well. So I will definitely talk with you in the new year. I've got some incredible interviews truly lined up, and I'm excited to share those with you. Until then, thank you for listening. Curious about where you stand in perfectionism? Head over to NicoleBurgessCoaching.com/assessment. Take that short little assessment that I've created just for you and see how you do. No right or wrong, just an assessment. Take care.